So Cochlear kind of looks like a snail shell, and this is where it comes from. So it kind of has a spiral-like shape, and thing is that is like, okay, so the spiral organ, very complex. What I want you to focus on is the basilar membrane, and yeah, this is the one that actually vibrates in response to pressure waves due to sound. Now, what we have here is the basilar membrane vibrates, and this causes all of this to start moving along as well. So you have all these hair cells, and this right up against the tectorial membrane. So when this vibrates, this causes the hair cells to distort by rubbing against the tectorial membrane, thereby opening all these mechanically gated channels, activating these nerve fibers that lead to the perception of sound. Now, remember I said that sound is due to some sort of movement and waves, right? Now here's wavelength again, so again, frequency. And hertz is a measure of frequency, so how many waves there are per second. And again, remember that frequency is related to pitch. More frequent leads to a higher pitch sound, less frequent waves lead to a lower pitch sound, right? Okay, so which travels further? Higher or low pitch sound? Think about it for a bit. We don't have time to think about it, but I'll spoil it for you. So here's a whale, and here's a mosquito. Now, can you hear a mosquito across the room? If you've been anywhere where there's a lot of mosquito or been camping here in Hawaii, how do you know when a mosquito is near you? Well, things that you probably hear the mosquito going really close to your ear, right? But even though it's like really close, the sound drops off pretty quickly if the mosquito is far from you. But how about whale sounds? These travel, they're pretty low pitched, and they travel across great distances. Whereas this mosquito's little sound, again, remember this is why it's like high pitched sounds don't travel very far, but low pitched sounds, they travel far distances. How does this relate to your sense of sound? The interesting is that the cochlea, well, here's I don't think this might not be in your Martini book, but the base is the part that's closest to that oval window, and then you have the apex. This is the inner part, the top of that screw or the snail shell. So this is the cochlear apex. Now things that cochlear base, this is what detects higher frequencies. And remember why? Well, things that if you have sound waves and pressure waves traveling, these have to travel all the way to here if it's actually going to reach the apex. But if you have a high-pitched sound, remember high-pitched sounds don't travel very far, so it doesn't make sense for high-pitched sounds to be detected in the furthest part of your cochlea. So the cochlear base actually, because it's closest to that actual oval window, this is what detects higher frequencies, these higher-pitched sounds like that mosquito. Whereas lower frequencies, again, lower frequencies travel further than higher frequencies. This is why lower frequencies actually are detected up here at the apex. So as you get higher in pitch, it starts to get detected more toward the base. As it gets lower in pitch, it's detected more toward the apex. And the spiral organ, so the basilar membrane, this is the part that vibrates in response to those pressure waves. And what we have here with the basilar membrane is that so what we see here is like, okay, higher pitch, so this is 20,000 hertz, so that's 20,000 waves per second, this frequency, and then up here we only have 200 hertz, so only 200 waves per second. So the basilar membrane, it actually vibrates according to the pitch of the sound. So the basilar membrane here vibrates in response to high sounds, whereas the basilar membrane here vibrates according to lower sounds. So the base, higher frequency sounds, and the thing is that it also has a stiffer membrane as well. So it's not only closer to the entrance of to the oval window, it's actually stiffer, that basilar membrane. It's also very narrow as well, whereas at the apex it's the opposite. So lower sounds, so you have a more flexible membrane, and it's also wider as well. Now, how do I draw this? So if you've ever played a stringed instrument, like I used to play the cello in high school, and it's interesting, if you play the exact same tone, like say you've played, or actually, let's use a violin. If you somehow played E on this A string right here, if you played that E on the A string loud enough, you can actually see the E string that has the same pitch also vibrate and resonate, and due to the airwaves and the sounds, even though you're not actually touching that string, it also starts to vibrate due to the changes in air pressure and all that frequency of the waves. So that's what we call resonance. But it's also, your basilar membrane is similar to a string instrument. Why? Because again, high pitch, well, if you start to tighten a string on like a guitar or a violin or any string instrument, it starts to increase the pitch as well. So same with the basilar membrane. The higher pitch sounds are with a tauter, skinnier sort of like membrane compared to something that's thicker and a lot more loose. Like if you start to add a lot of slack to a string instrument, it's going to make the pitch lower and due to the increased slack. And this is I don't need to go over this, but yeah, that's how sound and hearing are linked.